Welcome back to Stoic Mastery.
Hello again.
Today we are undertaking a deep dive into what is, well, arguably the most approachable, yet secretly dense, body of Stoic literature.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. We're talking about the selected philosophical letters of Lucius Annaeus Seneca to his friend Lucilius.
Right. And this collection is just, it's remarkable, isn't it?
It is, because it's doing two things at once. It serves two masters. On one hand, it's this deeply personal handbook for moral living.
The self-help side that everyone knows.
Exactly. But on the other, it's a sophisticated, really rigorous defense of the entire Stoic system. And our mission today is to unpack that unique project.
Because if you just read these as, self-help.
You miss the profound technical backbone Seneca is laying out. He isn't just a friendly, encouraging guide. I mean, he is that, but he's also an expert presenting this comprehensive justification for Stoicism's most counterintuitive claims.
Okay, so let's unpack that complex structure. We really need to see how Seneca manages that unique blend, how he can shift so seamlessly from giving advice on, handling grief or noise pollution, to wading into these deeply academic debates about metaphysics, causation, the very nature of reality.
And that's where the real magic is. We'll explore his core ethical system, the nature of the good, the equality of all virtues, and see how he constantly argues for the sufficiency of virtue for happiness.
And he's justifying those paradoxical Stoic assertions using some pretty high-level theory.
It's crucial to understand the context of the surviving collection, too. What we have isn't static.
Right. It develops.
There is a noticeable, you could say, systematic increase in philosophical intensity and just outright difficulty as you progress through the letters.
And that's not an accident.
No, not at all. This structural choice, it mirrors the supposed moral progress of the addressee of Lucilius. The earliest letters are, they're more remedial. They focus on practical moral discipline.
Yeah, the basics down.
Right. But as Lucilius grows in his philosophical maturity, Seneca starts subjecting him to this rigorous dialectical argument. He's suggesting Lucilius is ready for the heavy lifting, the stuff required to internalize Stoicism fully.
So it's an intellectual apprenticeship played out in real time.
It's exactly that.
So we're basically witnessing a staged curriculum. The more theoretically sound Lucilius becomes, the more difficult the subject matter Seneca throws at him. And that, right there, immediately elevates Seneca above the simple role of a spiritual advisor.
Absolutely. Let's start with this common misinterpretation, this dual role of the author.
Okay.
Many influential critics, inspired by some foundational work in the field, they characterize Seneca primarily as a spiritual guide.
A Roman counselor.
Yeah, a sort of precursor to modern life coaches.
Mm-hmm.
He offers consolatio, comfort and practical techniques.
That characterization, it captures the tone of a lot of the letters, but it feels so inadequate when you consider the sheer scope of his work. Why is treating him only as a spiritual guide philosophically risky?
Because if his motivation was solely pedagogical, just teaching morality, he could have skipped massive portions of his letters. He would have just avoided the technical, philosophical intensity of his broader intellectual project.
Ah, I see.
His mission wasn't merely to comfort or advise, it was to defend the intellectual validity of the entire Stoic universe.
And you only have to look at his total output to see that.
Yeah.
He wasn't just concerned with personal ethics, he wrote the natural questions.
Which is a massive work.
Huge. It's all about physics, meteorology, seismology, cosmology. He wrote these complex tragedies rooted in classic mythological themes. And then there's that scathing political satire, the apokolosyntosis.
The pumpkinification of Claudius.
A work of pure, biting rhetorical wit.
Exactly. So you have to ask, why would a Roman statesman, whose primary goal was strictly moral reform, bother writing so widely on such diverse philosophical and literary themes?
It just doesn't add up.
It suggests his intellectual curiosity, his commitment to understanding the world. It transcended simple self-help. Unlike, say, a philosopher focused strictly on moral reform, like Musonius Rufus, Seneca's writings on physics, on logic, on metaphysics, they are deeply integrated into his ethical framework.
So to really get Seneca, we have to view him as a serious philosophical author who's interested in theory, in argumentation, in convincing readers of what is the case about reality.
Not just offering comforting maxims, that's the key.
So his commitment to this comprehensive theoretical justification means he has to tackle subjects far beyond what mere moral guidance requires.
Yeah.
We see him wading into these incredibly technical arguments.
Like the nature of the summum genus or these intractable paradoxes of his own school.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of this technical material, these arguments on classification, causality, the nature of the soul, it's just far more intense than Lucilius would ever need if he were just looking for a simple path to tranquility. The core ethical claims of Stoicism, that virtue is sufficient for happiness, that external things don't matter. I mean, they sound like empty slogans, unless you can provide the rigorous justification that comes from Stoic physics and metaphysics. Seneca's commitment is to that justification.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because it connects his philosophical ambition to Roman cultural reality.
The struggle with language.
Exactly.
Sure.
Specifically in Letter 58, Seneca is grappling with the inherent limitations of Latin as a vehicle for complex Greek philosophical discussion. And this seems to be a recurring theme for Roman intellectuals.
It was a pervasive issue. Seneca stands right alongside Lucretius and Cicero in dealing with the inadequacy of Latin when you're trying to translate the precise Greek technical terminology that had been developed over centuries in Athens and Alexandria.
Right.
He really laments the difficulty in finding a single, concise Latin equivalent for the Greek term to on.
Which is the term for being, or what is. And his specific complaint is so telling. He notes that he is forced to replace a noun with a verb.
Yeah.
He has to use this cumbersome phrase, what is, quod est,
Instead of a single neat noun.
which he feels just weakens the philosophical rigor and precision of the whole argument. It sounds like he felt handicapped right out of the gate when he's trying to establish this hierarchy of existence.
That necessity really demonstrates the constraints of working within Latin scholarship, which, it lagged behind the Hellenistic tradition. However, Seneca is also highly pragmatic and proactive.
He doesn't just give up.
No, not at all. He actively works to expand the language. He mentions using calc translations, basically borrowing the Greek structure directly, or, and this is most interesting, promoting specific Greek terms like analogia or analogy to full citizenship within the Latin language.
So he's not just complaining about what Latin lacks. He's actively trying to forge a stronger philosophical tradition by incorporating the necessary tools. He's arguing that Roman philosophy needs to evolve its vocabulary to handle this deep level of abstract thought that Greek allowed.
It's an intellectual nation-building project, in a way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving from the structural project to the content.
We arrive at the very core of Stoicism, which Seneca spends hundreds of lines defending the ethical system, and the doctrine is unflinching. The only good is what is honorable, the honestum.
And everything else, health, wealth, reputation.
Is merely preferred or dispreferred, but ultimately they're dismissed as false and counterfeit goods.
Which sounds, it sounds extreme. If wealth and health aren't good, what is the practical goal of the Stoic life? How do you even decide which path to take?
And this is why Seneca stresses, especially in Letter 71, the absolute need for a single point of reference or a goal, a propositum in life.
The archer analogy.
He uses that powerful analogy of the archer aiming at a target, a scopus. Without establishing that one fixed star, the honestum or virtue, you just lack direction.
And if you lack that single goal, that reference point, you leave yourself entirely open to chance and fortune. Your life lacks direction, and you're vulnerable to external forces simply because you failed to plan with the highest good in mind.
Right. If you see wealth as a good,
then the loss of wealth necessarily diminishes your happiness. It has to.
Precisely. And Seneca dedicates Letter 76 to defending this exclusivity rigorously, using what we can call the argument from exclusivity. He starts with a question. What is the single best, most defining feature of a human being?
Reason.
Correct. Reason is what sets us definitively apart from animals and, crucially, connects us to the divine order, the logos. Therefore, perfected reason, virtue, must be our proper and exclusive good.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though, just for a second. A non-Stoic, say, a peripatetic following Aristotle, would argue that health and external success are necessary ingredients for a fully happy life.
Sure.
So if we admit that strength or wealth or public office are also valuable, why does that immediately undermine virtue? Can't virtue be the most important good rather than the only good?
Seneca, channeling the orthodox Stoic line, would argue that if we admit anything else is a good, virtue becomes just one good among many, and so it becomes vulnerable.
So if wealth is a good, your happiness is now dependent on something external and unstable.
And if external factors can destroy your happiness, then your happiness is no longer stable, and therefore, it's not the highest good. The only way to achieve guaranteed, stable happiness is to tie it exclusively to the one thing that cannot be taken away, the perfected state of your internal reason.
And the argument goes even further, right? To preserve the distinction between species.
Right. If we grant that shared traits, like physical strength or swiftness, are sufficient for the good life.
Then the distinction between humans and non-rational animals just collapses.
Absolutely. If animals can live a happy life just by possessing traits we call good like speed or robust health, then Stoic ethics fails to explain human exceptionalism, which is built on our unique capacity for moral reason.
The only way to preserve the stability and the uniqueness of happiness is to claim that the good is unique to humanity.
Perfected reason, or virtue, is the only way the system holds.
This philosophical rigor leads us to one of the most technical and, frankly, counterintuitive Stoic commitments that Seneca articulates.
I know where you're going.
The corporeal nature of the good, which he gets into in letter 106. For a modern listener, the idea that justice or courage are bodies. It sounds absurd.
It does.
Why does Stoicism insist the good must be physical?
It's the ultimate consequence of their foundational metaphysical principle, corporealism. Stoic physics strictly asserts that only bodies exist, and only bodies can do something or be affected by something. They are deeply committed to the concept that that which does something is a body.
And the good certainly does something.
Precisely. The good, by definition, benefits us. It makes the soul cohesive, it strengthens the mind, it causes improvement. Seneca argues that since the good performs an action, it benefits, it causes a change in the mind, it must therefore be a body.
Because if it were incorporeal, it would be passive.
Exactly. Unable to affect the material world and so totally irrelevant to human progress.
So, if the mind, the hegemonicon, and the soul are physical, material substances, which the Stoics believed,
They did.
and virtue affects and organizes these physical substances, then virtue itself must be physical, a disposition or a tension within the material soul.
That's the logical chain, and it's absolutely essential for understanding their entire system. Seneca uses analogies to make this claim less jarring.
Okay.
The goods of a body like nourishment, health, physical fitness are either bodies themselves or are provided by bodies. Furthermore, he argues that the vices, anger, fear, lust, are understood as bodily dispositions or states of the soul that cause physical change.
So, by parity of reasoning.
Their opposites, the virtues, must also be corporeal states of the soul. For the Stoics, the commitment is total. The mind, the soul, the good all are material realities.
Which puts them in direct philosophical opposition to the Platonists and Aristotelians.
Who allowed for extensive incorporeal realities, yes.
Wow. Okay, so that deep commitment to materialism leads us directly to another famous Stoic paradox, the equality and unity of virtues and goods.
Letters 66 and 71.
Right. If virtue is the only good, then the goods produced by virtue must be equal. This means, conceptually, that courage, temperance, and justice are all equal in value.
And it also means, to use your example, that the good of getting out of bed is equal to the good of saving your nation.
Which feels incredibly counterintuitive.
It does, but it flows logically from the definition of virtue as a diathesis, an all-inclusive maximal perfection. The Stoics defined virtue as a state of mind that is straight and unswerving.
Like a mathematical concept.
Think of it that way, yes. Once something reaches a maximal quality, it cannot be increased. There is no such thing as being more perfect or more straight or more correct. Virtue is considered this absolute maximal quality of reason.
So if you possess virtue, you possess it totally, and it is uniform in its perfection. The situation in which you apply it
The raw material, as Seneca calls it,
is irrelevant to the quality of the virtue itself. The straightness of the line doesn't depend on the length of the line.
Precisely. Seneca illustrates this beautifully with the example of Cato the Younger in Letter 71. He asks, is Cato winning the praetor election a better good than him losing it? Or even better than him losing the decisive battle of Pharsalus?
And his answer is no.
He argues they are equal because the same virtue, magnanimity, courage, integrity is required in both instances. Magnanimity is needed to overcome bad fortune, and self-control, temperantia, is required to regulate good fortune and ensure success doesn't corrupt you.
So since virtue can't be greater or lesser,
The goods produced are equally good.
but the magnitude of the task is clearly different. Defeating Caesar philosophically seems like a much greater challenge than winning a small election. Can't we say the virtue applied to the harder task, even if formally equal, is more impressive or rare?
Seneca acknowledges that emotional pushback. We see this dramatic tension in his discussion of Mucius Scaevola in Letter 66.
The man who burned his own hand.
Right. Scaevola burned his hand to demonstrate resolve and conquer his enemies unarmed. Seneca compares Mucius's mangled, burned hand, his act of virtue amidst terrible pain, to the healthy hand of even the bravest man.
And he concedes that, emotionally or conventionally, the act of virtue amidst severe hardship might seem greater because it's rarer. It required a more heroic expenditure of magnanimity to endure the difficulty.
Yes, but formally, when judged by the virtue involved, they are equal. The virtue of endurance, which allowed Mucius to transcend external circumstances, is a complete, unchangeable good.
He makes the same point with the Numantian siege, right?
He does. The virtue of Scipio, who bravely stormed the walls, is equal to the virtue of the besieged Numantians who chose collective suicide over defeat. Virtue's value is entirely independent of the external circumstances, the materia it operates within.
He's teaching Lucilius that success or failure in the eyes of the world is irrelevant to the true moral score of the action.
That's the lesson.
This philosophical rigor just confirms that Seneca is engaging in far more than simple moral guidance. He's constructing an airtight logical defense.
Absolutely.
So let's delve into the areas he explores to provide these theoretical foundations. Starting with the debate on causality in Letter 65, Seneca uses this discussion to introduce Stoic physics and critique the prevailing non-Stoic systems.
This specific letter is an excellent example of Seneca engaging in high-level scholastic debate. He starts by laying out the traditional pluralistic views, which were, common currency among philosophers.
He outlines Aristotle's well-known four causes.
The system that defined Western thought for centuries.
Okay, remind us of those four causes and how they relate to, say, sculpting a statue.
Sure. If we take the creation of a statue, the four causes are, first, the material cause, so the bronze or the marble.
The stuff it's made of.
Right. Second, the workman, or efficient cause, the sculptor. Third, the form cause, which is the shape imposed, the way the bronze is actually configured. And fourth, the purpose, or final cause. The reason the statue is made may be to honor a god or a hero.
And then Seneca brings in Plato, who complicates things even further by adding a fifth dimension.
Correct. The Platonic tradition adds the model, or idea, the exemplary form that the maker imitates. So the sculptor isn't just creating the shape, they're looking at the perfect, abstract form of hero that exists outside of time. That abstract form is the model.
So we have this layered pluralistic view of reality where multiple factors, both material and immaterial, are considered causes.
Yeah.
How does the unitary Stoic system respond to this swarm of causes, as Seneca calls it?
Seneca presents the Stoic view that there is fundamentally and primarily one cause, that which makes the active cause. This cause is simple. Just as matter, the passive cause is simple.
And this single active cause is?
It's identified as reason in action, or the creative fire, the pneuma, which is really just another word for God, or the cosmic logos. God acts upon matter to bring about all things.
So all those other alleged causes, form, model, purpose, they're completely downgraded.
They are dismissed as being causes at all.
Really?
Seneca argues that the form and the model are not true causes. They are merely means necessary for the cause. The artisan needs a model, just as he needs his tools. A hammer, a chisel, a file.
So we wouldn't say the hammer is a cause of the statue.
Exactly. Without these means, the craft can't proceed, but they aren't the cause. They're just necessary instruments. The true cause is the active principle, the reason and skill of the sculptor, or on a cosmic scale, God's reason.
This insistence on simplicity is very telling. It rejects the pluralistic, dualistic view of the Platonists and affirms the Stoic commitment to a unified material universe governed by a single, rational, active force.
And Seneca is using this dry, technical debate to assert the superiority of Stoic physics.
He calls it a swarm of causes.
Per causarum. He's implying they're unnecessarily complex and confusing. The Stoics preferred elegant simplicity. Two principles, the active and the passive. Everything else is either a body or an incorporeal, which for Stoics mostly consists of things like place, time, void, and sayables, things that can't act.
Seneca isn't content just to argue about clauses. He also engages with the hierarchy of being in Letter 58, exploring this complex Platonic classification to establish the structure of existence. Why dedicate so much time to this abstract ontology?
Well, he's trying to establish the existence of genera and species, these necessary philosophical categories, to understand how things relate to each other and how knowledge is structured. He attempts to ascend the classification ladder.
Starting from familiar species like a horse or a dog.
And working up to the summum genus, which he calls what is, tuon, and
Mhm.
this highest genus has to logically include everything, both body and non-body.
That structure, working from the familiar up to the abstract, is a highly methodical, almost scholastic approach.
It is, and it shows Seneca's thoroughness. But here's the critical Stoic intrusion. While Seneca's logical division eventually leads him to the Platonic concept of incorporeals, he has to adhere to the Stoic tenet of corporealism.
He can't just grant independent external reality to incorporeal forms right away.
No, that would contradict Stoic physics, which views the soul as material.
So how does he manage to incorporate the essential Platonic forms, the models, the ideas, without abandoning his materialist foundation?
He cleverly internalizes them. He explains that the model or exemplar, the Platonic idea, is mind-dependent. It can reside as an idea in the mind of God, whom he calls the demiurge, the creative reason.
So the form exists. It's real, but it's not a separately existing mind-independent entity floating in some other realm. It's the perfect plan, the blueprint residing in the divine mind.
It's a pragmatic assimilation. Seneca gets the benefit of the Platonic blueprint for creation, the rational order, without having to violate the fundamental Stoic commitment that everything real and active is material.
It allows the system to hold together. He's showing Lucilius that Stoicism, far from being some crude materialism, can rationally account for abstract concepts and divine intelligence.
By integrating them into the active principle of God.
Okay, now let's move to the most delightfully absurd technicality, letter 113. This is the debate that confirms every stereotype people have about philosophers wasting time.
It's a classic.
Seneca raises the question, which is widely debated within the Stoic school, of whether justice, courage, practical wisdom, and the rest of the virtues are animals.
It sounds utterly preposterous, but it perfectly illustrates the logical extremes that were forced upon the Stoic school by their strict corporealism.
Okay, let's walk through the orthodox rationale. How on earth did they arrive at the conclusion that virtues are animals?
The chain of logic is simple and severe. The virtues are dispositions or states of the mind. The mind, the hegemonikon, according to Stoic physics, is a living, corporeal thing, a vital piece of the person who is an animal. So, since the part of the mind that possesses the virtue is living, they concluded that the virtues must be persistent, distinct states of a living thing. And since the virtues themselves are said to be living principles of morally pertinent knowledge,
The conclusion was technically, virtues are animals.
yes.
I see the horrifying hyper-literal internal consistency. If the container, the mind, is a material living animal, then the stable contents must also be defined in some physical living way. But where does Seneca break the logic?
He applies the reductio ad absurdum brilliantly. He points out that if virtues are animals, then vices, anger, fear, grief, suspicion, lust must also be animals.
Okay.
Since the mind is singular, we each have only one hegemonikon. If each virtue and vice is a persistent animal, you would have numerous distinct persistent animals. Justice, courage, greed, anger, all existing simultaneously inside one single mind and one single body.
So he argues that this violates the basic metaphysical principle that there cannot be one mind serving two animals.
Let alone a whole zoo of moral and immoral animals.
Exactly. He's deliberately pushing the technicality to its breaking point to show the absurdity of scholastic over-refinement.
And he doesn't stop there. He gets a little comical with it.
He does. He indulges in comic imagery, asking if these virtue animals are human-shaped or horse-shaped, or maybe perfectly spherical, like the Stoic description of God. And if they are spherical, are greed and luxury also spherical?
That moment of intellectual exasperation is what makes the letter so memorable. He's using this high-stakes absurdity to critique the academic tendency to prioritize words over deeds.
And his conclusion is one of the most quotable moments in the entire collection. He asks, "When I have learned what the difference is between wisdom and being wise, will I be wise? Why then do you tie me down with the words of wisdom instead of with its deeds?"
His ultimate goal in detailing these dry debates is to show Lucilius that theoretical knowledge must always be subordinated to the practical deed of philosophy.
Becoming braver, more confident, and superior to fortune, that's the real work. That is a perfect pivot point. After dedicating so much effort to the theoretical justification, proving why virtue is the only good, Seneca has to show Lucilius how that applies to the messiness of real life and adversity.
Right, and in letter 85, he uses the powerful analogy of the wise man as a craftsman.
This is a classic Stoic strategy, isn't it, to manage expectations about external outcomes?
It is. Seneca compares the wise person to Phidias, the renowned sculptor. Phidias's skill is in making beautiful statues, and he can do so from rich materials like ivory and bronze, but his skill is equally proven if he has to use cheaper materials. The craftsman's skill is in producing the best possible statue from the raw material available.
And the raw material in this life is fortune, whether that material is smooth wealth, health, fame, or coarse.
Poverty, illness, exile.
The wise person displays the perfection of virtue regardless of the raw material.
He then shifts to the analogy of the ship captain. The captain's professional art isn't impaired by a terrible storm, only his success in reaching the harbor safely is. The captain did not promise success.
He promised skill and knowledge of how to steer.
Right.
So the wise person's purpose in life isn't defined by carrying out specific, externally successful undertakings like getting rich or becoming consul, but by doing everything properly with reason and consistency.
And that separates the inner moral intention from the external outcome, which is outside our control.
Yes.
The wise person's virtue, his art of living, is not impaired by bad fortune because he is a craftsman at mastering misfortune. He can gentle pain, hunger, humiliation, and exile, using them as opportunities to express magnanimity.
So the only true bad, the only failure, is yielding to what is called bad.
And surrendering one's freedom, one's libertas, or inner moral integrity. The wise man, using his reason, makes productive use of bad circumstances.
That sounds like such an unattainable ideal, though. Does Seneca truly believe that Lucilius or any ordinary student can achieve the absolute perfection of the Stoic sage? Or does he clearly distinguish between the perfect ideal of the student?
Oh, he absolutely maintains the distinction between the wise person, the sage, and the progressor, the student, like Lucilius. He addresses this explicitly in letters 71 and 75.
And the progressor is?
Still liable to instability, liable to backsliding, and cannot yet provide the kind of perfectly reliable moral intuitions that define the sage.
And what's crucial here is Seneca's own humility. He admits he's still in the process.
That admission is vital for the listener. Seneca confesses, "In this moment of striking personal honesty, I am still urging on myself the things which I praise, but I don't yet convince myself about them."
Which maintains the high, absolute standard of the sage while giving hope to the student.
Acknowledging that moral progress is a lifelong, often halting journey, Seneca constantly observes that those who claim wisdom are often terrified by trivial threats. This inability to maintain composure under minor pressure is the key feature separating the progressor from the achieved sage.
This recognition of human frailty leads him to critique the common ways people live contrary to nature.
Specifically their pursuit of luxury and notoriety, which he just attacks in letters 122 and 123.
Why is deviating from nature so philosophically dangerous?
For the Stoics, living according to nature means living according to reason, which is the natural guiding principle of the cosmos. Seneca argues that all vices rebel against this rational, natural order.
Luxury's goal is to rejoice in what is twisted.
And get as far away from what is straight or easy as possible. Vice is rebellious, seeking deviation for its own sake.
He provides these wonderful, vivid examples of this perverse rebellion.
He does. He talks about people drinking on an empty stomach just because it's not traditional, or reversing the functions of day and night living entirely by torchlight just to be unique.
They're seeking notoriety, no, Tisha?
Yes, if they aren't talked about for their eccentric excesses, they feel their effort is wasted. They reject what is hackneyed and vulgar and try to mark themselves off by the way they abuse their time and resources.
But Seneca connects this deviation directly to a lack of discipline and a lack of freedom.
If we follow nature, everything is easy and unimpeded. But if we struggle against it, our life is like rowing against a relentless current.
And the key solution he offers for the progressor is
training and habit. He stresses that one cannot be tranquil if attached to anything beyond the absolute minimum necessary for life. We have to train ourselves on simple, natural needs. Food to quell hunger, rest after fatigue. Habits shape preferences.
And the ability to accept simple sustenance prevents fussiness and the psychological risks of attachment that lead to servitude.
The discipline to choose the minimum necessary is the foundation of true freedom, libertas.
Finally, let's circle back to the theoretical justification, specifically epistemology. How do we even acquire the concept of the good and the honorable, if not by explicit teaching or direct sense experience?
Right, and Seneca addresses this in letter 120 using the concept of analogy.
So the Stoic epistemology rejects simple empiricism. It's not just accumulated sense data.
No. Their position is that nature gives us the seeds of knowledge or preconceptions, prolepses, but not knowledge itself. We need reason to cultivate these seeds.
And chance is ruled out as a source for reliable moral truth.
Instead, we acquire the concept of the good and the honorable through analogy or comparison.
So we don't feel the good. We infer it from observing repeated patterns of behavior. It's a cognitive leap.
It is a rational inference. We infer the permanent, stable form of virtue by observing and comparing actions that exhibit a noble spirit. Seneca uses the powerful historical example of Gaius Fabricius Licinus.
The Roman general during the war against King Pyrrhus.
Exactly.
Fabricius is famous for two things in this context: rejecting Pyrrhus's massive gold bribe,
And later warning Pyrrhus when his own physician offered to poison the king.
Seneca highlights this pairing. Why? Because it demonstrates consistency.
It was a mark of the same consistent, principled character that Fabricius was swayed neither by the temptation of gold bribery nor by the temptation of an easy victory poison. We observe these actions, done repeatedly, with a noble spirit, independent of circumstance.
And through this careful, rational comparison, this analogia, we infer the existence of a stable, internal concept of virtue and honor.
That's a sophisticated defense of how we grasp abstract moral truth. And this ability to reason and infer the good from consistent observation is what distinguishes us from non-rational animals, reinforcing the fundamental Stoic belief that virtue is unique and exclusive to humanity.
So this deep dive really shows just how vital and multi-layered Seneca's letters are. They resist any simple categorization.
They are a treasure trove precisely because they provide not just moral encouragement, but the deep theoretical underpinning necessary, the physics, the metaphysics, the epistemology, to justify the seemingly paradoxical Stoic life.
It's that constant conscious connection between the theoretical justification and the moral outcome that makes him such a powerful figure for students today.
You need the metaphysical arguments to understand why virtue alone is sufficient for happiness.
Otherwise, it's just empty rhetoric.
Seneca himself states explicitly in Letter 76 that the whole point of delving into these intellectual debates is that virtue makes the mind stronger, loftier, and fuller. The goal of philosophy, whether it's physics or ethics, is to uplift the mind, thereby achieving superiority over the unpredictable chaos of fortune.
And that profound connection leads us to our concluding thought. Seneca argued that if we direct all our learning to the end of becoming braver, more confident, and superior to fortune, we will succeed.
Powerful promise.
But consider his technical commitment to the corporeal nature of the soul and the good. That knowledge and virtue are, in fact, physical states, specific dispositions of a material mind. Does that make our progress toward mastery quantifiable, perhaps even subject to the known laws of material decay or rearrangement? Or, given Seneca's acknowledgement of the constant variability and flux of the material world, does the fact that virtue is a bodily state mean that true, absolute, unyielding mastery is always a fleeting diathesis, a perfection only reliably achieved by the unchanging rational logos itself?
It's a challenge inherent in the materialist foundation of the very philosophy designed to provide absolute stability.
It is. You decide what degree of mastery to pursue in your ongoing studies.